Yes, welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy, again holding a conversation with a business communication expert so that you and I can learn tips and strategies that will boost our business. Today, I'm delighted to host Jim Kerlin. Jim teaches online sales and marketing courses as adjunct faculty instructor at Troy University. He is a business consultant and contractor with Blackwood Impact Group of Duluth, Georgia. He specializes in sales consulting, coaching, training, assessment, strategy, enablement. He and his wife, Deborah, reside in Brundage, Alabama, and enjoy visiting their two children and three grandchildren in Athens and Social Circle, Georgia. So, Jim Kerlin, welcome to the Biz Communication Show.
Thank you, Bill. It's good to be with you.
Well, I've heard you in action before because I have attended one of your seminars for the Hall Chamber of Commerce here in Gainesville, Georgia. So it's good to have you in action on the Biz Communication Show. And the first question I want to start with has to do with the way salespeople talk and the way you teach them and coach them and train them to talk. Many times when people hear the word salesperson, there's certain terms that come to mind: pushy, aggressive, fast, big closer. And I'm wondering, Jim, in your coaching and your teaching, what how do you approach that traditional style of sales wording, and what do you suggest maybe instead of those words to describe salespeople?
Well, Bill, that's a great question. I would just say I would describe that as the opposite of what I teach. I think salespeople get a bad reputation a lot of times because of just those very adjectives. And I would say a sales conversation, notice I said conversation.
Not not a pitch, but a conversation.
Not an appointment. It's a meeting. We have meetings with friends and acquaintances. We have appointments with doctors, attorneys, and people that usually are painful and extract money on the spot. Now, I would say I want them to have a conversation to figure out if it makes sense to do business or not, and remain neutral in the process, emotionally unattached to the outcome, but to be curious, to be skeptical. When they talk too much, you've heard the phrase, they show up and throw up all their features and benefits. That's not what people buy. They buy solutions to whatever it is that ails them. So I would say the very best salespeople, the high performers, have a few traits in common. One is they are driven. They have an internal ambition. Persistence is a word you hear a lot along those lines, but persistence, when overused, becomes aggressive. It becomes pushy. The other thing would be self-awareness. If you say, if they know they're not good at a particular portion of the sales process, let's say, and they need to work on that, they're aware of that. But on the other hand, they're aware of their strengths as well. So that helps a lot to know they're not going to have some blind spots. Another thing is they're coachable, meaning they're open to new ideas and new ways and techniques of trying things. Some of the best salespeople that I've worked with, if I mention something, they'll say, well, I do know how to do that. And then they quickly add, but I can always be better at it. That's music to my ears.
That's the kind of salesperson that you want to work with.
Exactly, because they're making themselves open to trying, being willing to fail with a coach so that they don't fail with a client.
Jim, let me comment on something that you said. Everything you have pointed out is very vital, and it meets the, as you say, the contemporary way that salespeople can be successful. One point I want to mention is you said that the salesperson who is going to be professional must learn to be emotionally unattached to the outcome at the moment. Now, this does not mean that they're indifferent, but in my judgment, what that means is that you don't come into it as a do or die situation, that you have to make that close that day, or your sales manager will look on you as a failure, or you'll look on yourself as a failure. You're emotionally detached in that you can take whatever direction the sales conversation goes and you can flow with it. Is that correct?
Yes. And I use the word unattached as opposed to detached. I know you like precision with language. And the reason I say that is because even though they've done some research on that client before they got there, they have a good idea of which direction the conversation can be carried. They want to have the neutrality of hearing new things for the first time. And that brings me really to a couple other characteristics of the best salespeople. One is that mindset of abundance and not scarcity. Yes, act as if you've got $1 million in the bank and this deal is not going to make or break you. Also, they have a positive attitude. They stay positive naturally. It's what comes natural to them. And they have, most importantly, a service to others mentality, meaning I'm here to help you, not make a sale. So there's a difference there.
That's a vital difference, vital.
And the other thing you're bringing up is how well are their listening skills, which is usually a great sign. Bill, I remember early on when I first got into sales, I got there unintentionally, but I got promoted into a position that was sales. I guess they thought I had the gift of gab. And
you were glib enough.
I had that, but that's not really what I needed. What I needed was to be a better listener and to learn how to ask the right questions. And those were keys to improving that I worked on over the years.
So, Jim, you remind me very much of one of the first major flaws I made, and I've made a lot of them. But I remember early in my career as a consultant, when I was attempting to find clients for my services, I got an appointment with a very, very significant leader, and I wanted that contract. I made the mistake that a lot of neophyte salespeople make. I went in there and I immediately, soon after the introduction, I immediately told them what they needed. And they looked at me rather blankly and they said, "We've already got somebody on our staff who takes care of that. Have you got anything else to offer?" Very fortunately, I did. Very fortunately, they hired me for a 90-minute seminar, and I was just very blessed and fortunate that they didn't say, "Get out of here," to begin with. Because and for example, I think we could compare that. You mentioned appointments with doctors. We could compare that with physicians. If you walked in and even before they examine you, say, "Here's what you need. I'm writing a prescription. We're scheduling surgery," you'd be out of there pretty quickly, wouldn't you, Jim?
Right. That's called malpractice in sales. That's prescribing without diagnosis, right?
Yes. Well, I imagine, what are some of the keys that you have for teaching your sales coaching clients to listen more effectively? What do you tell them? Are there some exercises that you have?
Well, Bill, there are several communication skills, and listening is just one of them. Usually they're coupled with other skills as well, but I know you have eloquently covered on your show Covey's 5 levels of listening. And that certainly is something that they need to be aware of, because you may have a salesperson who is the argumentative type, and they are going to be pretending to listen, maybe selective at best what they're listening. And some of them would argue with a fence post. And that is not going to get them very far in a sales meeting.
It might get them out the door.
Exactly. So, when you get to that fifth level, that empathetic listening, I would add to that, listen as if you have something important to learn in that meeting. And what I mean by that is, if you'll approach it from the standpoint of this mentality, I may feel as though I can help anybody, but not everybody is ready for what I have to offer. And what that gets you is the ability to pick your ideal candidates to work with, so that you don't work with somebody that becomes high maintenance and you need to fire them. And I hope that doesn't surprise you, because that's the problem that some owners have, is they in their business, they take on clients that they had no business taking on. And so I'd say be selective in who you're going to work with there. And if the salesperson will approach it from that standpoint of, I'm not sure if I can help you or not, but I'm willing to find out. And we'll have a conversation. You'll tell me the things that you're looking to work on. I'll tell you the things that I can help you with. And if there's some common ground there, perhaps we can do business, and we'll figure out that as we go. And if we can't, let's agree at the end of the meeting to part company as friends. We may stay connected on LinkedIn or other social media, so that we can perhaps send recommendations or referrals and introductions to other people. But otherwise, they are taking the approach that I'm here to help. Let's figure that out.
I think the major shift that we have seen, and that you have explained so well, is that if traditionally sales was pushy and aggressive, the change now to not only what salespeople should be, but what will be effective, the change now is not to be centered on how much this sale is going to benefit me with my company and with my bonuses and with my salary, but the focus is, how much am I going to help this client with the service or product that I have to offer, if it's a fit for them? Would that sum it up pretty well?
It sums it up very well.
Another question I want to pose to you, because I know many people have a great fear of making cold calls. What do you teach your salespeople about that?
I would say, I'm probably going to surprise you with my answer on this one, Bill. I would say make them, and for CEOs, take them. Make them and take them would be my advice. And here's why I say that. First of all, in today's technology world, there's no such thing as a cold call anymore. Anybody that can take 30 seconds to 2 minutes to do a quick internet search and find out something, to have a talking point to start a conversation with anyone. Usually you can find very quickly who the name of the decision maker is that you want to speak with. And you have that so that you can actually go on a first name basis when you call that person. Now, that may sound rude, but think about it, Bill. If you're going to have a conversation, salespeople need to have one with the top decision maker and work from the top down. If they get referred down in the organization, that's okay. But they don't want to be that salmon swimming upstream, beating themselves against the competition because they didn't have the nerve to call to the top to begin with. And their competitor didn't have that fear and beat them to the sale simply because they weren't even on their radar yet.
I want to underscore also what you said, Jim, about first name basis. When I got probably past, I suppose, maybe 30 years old, I started realizing that if I were addressing someone who has a high position and I call them Mr. or Miss or Mrs., I am all of a sudden setting up a formal situation. It's not one, and it also is one which puts me down at a much lower level. And friendly people talk to each other by first name. Some people might be surprised that we're recommending that. Aren't we being inconsiderate? Aren't we being rude? No, we're not. We're breaking what many people have established as a long time barrier. And there's no need to be subservient to somebody to start out with. I'm glad to hear you advising that.
Well, I would call it equal business stature. And that goes back to mindset, because if the salesperson sees themselves as an equal to that CEO, president, you name it, title, then they're going to be able to have a better conversation with that person, because that's no longer a barrier to that. And they didn't start off by, as you put it, being subservient and begging for the business.
Something that I hear debated back and forth a good bit, because salespeople can be very confused about this. And I'm thinking now of independent contractors, such as consultants who have services to sell. You're advising someone who, let's say, is a new consultant, and they have no idea how to price their services. They don't want to price themselves out of the picture, but they also want to show that what they're offering has value. What do you tell them, Jim? What do you tell these people you're training about pricing?
Well, I think the tendency for most of them is to greatly undervalue their services. And a lot of times, an easy way to tell if you're underpriced is how quickly you're getting new business, and even business with people, to go back to what I said earlier, that are not your ideal prospect. So I would caution them to say, let's look at what value is this to your potential client? What kind of pain, what kind of headache, what kind of cost are you going to save them by providing this service? So if they do a good job in the sales meeting of quantifying that pain, if you will, let's say, for example, that the person has already spent $2,500 trying to solve a problem, and yet this person knows that what he needs to do is going to cost $10,000. And that may seem like a great barrier to overcome, but if he does a good job of figuring out, how does this person go about making these decisions? What kind of budget does he have in mind? I think a big problem salespeople have is they don't even ask the budget question. They're afraid to talk about the money. The second problem they have is they approach it from either their own mindset about money, either abundance or scarcity. And both of those impostures can hurt them. And what I mean by that goes back to our point about being neutral in that conversation. Ask the questions to find out, how does this person think about money? How does this person think about what he's willing to spend to solve this problem? I'll give you a quick example. My brother was fishing this week in Mexico, and they went deep sea fishing, and he and his doctor buddy that was also fishing with him caught a marlin. Now, they both hooked him at the same time. He took both baits. And so when they got him in, my brother graciously offered to step aside and let him have the trophy to mount on his wall. Well, this doctor was willing to spend $2,000 to have this 8-foot marlin, striped marlin mounted and sent back, and do all the things that you have to do to have that done. He didn't even blink about that in terms of the amount of money. Now, you and I might look at that and say, well, it probably only, first of all, they're not going to use the real fish. They're going to take, the measurements. They're going to go into all these different things. Yeah, he's got some shipping costs, but maybe they're going to spend $500 getting that fish where it's mountable. So why would he be willing to pay $2,000? And I would say to you, because that's what he wanted. And he had the mentality to spend that amount of money. So a lot of times we go into things with the wrong idea about money. In his case, he had an abundance mentality. A person with scarcity mentality would have been haggling over the price.
Well, I think too, another factor that we need, and we're about to wind up this great advice that you've been giving. One word that is key here is value. I've heard it said by in sales books and sales videos. I've heard it said that once you establish enough value, prices is not an obstacle. And one term that I heard years ago, when you're presenting a proposal to somebody, don't use the word cost or price, use the word investment, because it really is an investment that you're helping them make.
Truly. And again, it goes back to how well can you figure out what this person's pain is that they're willing to spend. And I'm not talking about taking advantage of anybody. Don't take this the wrong way. I'm just saying the tendency is for salespeople to quite undervalue their services. And because of that, sometimes they have to go into that budget conversation with, let's call it 3 hat sizes: small, medium, and large offerings. And the thing that changes about each of those is the amount of service or product that will be provided at each of those levels. And at least that gives the conversation to where the person who is willing to spend more, some options and the services they can get if those are the ones that they indicated they needed. But it also gives them a chance to pare back what they can get done right now on the budget they had in mind. Because a lot of times when you're having that budget conversation, this person may have never bought this service before. And there's a little bit of education that has to happen about what the current pricing level and value of these services are.
Jim, this has been a very enlightening and pleasant conversation on the Biz Communication Show. There are people, I'm sure, who want to get in touch with you. I mentioned at the outset that I have heard you present a sales training seminar. I was extremely impressed then. I value what you have done today and sharing such wonderful guidelines with us. So for those who want to contact you, and I'm sure there are many of them, please give us your contact information.
Well, the easiest way to reach me is on LinkedIn. And that's by my name, Jim Kerlin, Kerlin. And I'm usually the first one that pops up there.
Thank you. And I encourage people to contact Jim. And since he's given his contact information, I'm happy to share mine. Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy. So logically, my website is B-I-Z, bizcommunicationguy.com. I invite you to go there, check my services for corporations and leaders, and then give me a call to discuss your communication problems and challenges and see how I can work with you to find a solution. Again, thanks to Jim Kerlin for being with us today. Thanks to those of you who joined us on video and those on the podcast. Be with us again next week for a highly informative session on the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton.